Version 1. Dramatic Impact. A husband abandoned his wife and twin babies in a condemned farmhouse. No electricity, no running water, no help. He expected them to die. But what happened in the next 10 days defies all explanation. This true story from Tennessee made millions cry. Dramatic pause. 1 second. CTA, call to action. 25 to 30 seconds. Before I tell you this true story that changed laws and saved lives, tell me, where are you watching from? Comment your country now. And if you believe the worst moments can transform into the greatest miracles, subscribe and hit that bell, because when you discover how an abandoned mother transformed a destroyed house into a thriving farm, and how an entire community united to save babies their own father left to die, you'll understand why they called this place Hope Farm. The gravel crunched under the tires as Marcus Thompson pulled up to the old farmhouse on the outskirts of rural Tennessee. The two-story structure loomed in the fading afternoon light, windows broken, paint peeling, porch sagging. It had been abandoned for at least a decade. In the passenger seat, his wife Sarah clutched their 6-month-old twins, Emma and Ethan, trying to keep them quiet. The babies sensed the tension and had been fussy for the entire 2-hour drive. "Marcus, where are we?" Sarah asked, looking at the dilapidated building with growing unease. "This place looks condemned." "It's temporary," Marcus said, his jaw tight. "Just until I figure things out." "Figure what out?" "Marcus, what's going on?" He didn't answer. Instead, he got out of the car and started unloading bags from the trunk. Diapers, formula, a few changes of clothes for Sarah and the babies. Sarah's heart began to race. Something was very wrong. Marcus and Sarah had been married for 3 years. They'd met in college, fallen in love quickly, married young. The twins had come as a surprise. They'd been trying for 1 baby, and nature gave them 2. At first, Marcus had seemed excited. But as the reality of twin infants set in, the sleepless nights, the doubled expenses, the constant crying, the complete loss of freedom, something in Marcus had broken. He'd started staying late at work, then coming home drunk, then not coming home at all some nights. 2 weeks ago, he'd lost his job at the auto plant. He'd been drinking on the job, they said. Unsafe. Unreliable. And 3 days ago, the landlord had evicted them. Marcus hadn't paid rent in 2 months. All their savings, what little they had been drained by baby expenses and Marcus's drinking. "We'll stay with my sister in Memphis," Sarah had said. She offered. "I'm not crawling to your family for help," Marcus had snapped. "I'll handle this." But handling it apparently meant bringing them to an abandoned farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. "Marcus, we can't stay here," Sarah said, getting out of the car with the twins. Emma was crying now, that sharp newborn wail that cut through everything. "There's no electricity. No running water. The babies." "It's fine for a few days," Marcus interrupted, carrying the bags onto the sagging porch. "There's a well out back. The roof mostly holds. You'll be safe." "Safe?" "Marcus, this place is falling apart." He turned to face her, and Sarah saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before, cold indifference. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah." "Do what?" "This. The babies. The responsibility. I feel like I'm drowning. Every day, all I hear is crying. Every penny I used to make, goes to diapers and formula. I can't breathe." "So what are you saying?" Sarah's voice was trembling. "I'm saying I need out. I need to clear my head. Figure out my next move. Marcus, you have twins. 6-month-old twins. You can't just. I can't take them with me. His voice rose, and both babies started crying now. I don't have money for hotels. I don't have money for food. I don't have anything. Then we'll figure it out together. That's what marriage is. I don't want to figure it out. Marcus shouted. I want my life back. I want to be able to sleep, to think, to exist without constant noise and need and demands. Sarah stared at him, Emma and Ethan both wailing in her arms. So you're just going to leave us here? In an abandoned farmhouse? With no power, no water, no way to call for help. It's temporary. Just a week. Maybe 2. I need to get my head straight. Find a job. Get some money together. Then I'll come back and we'll figure out what to do next. Marcus, this is insane. This is. Sarah looked around at the desolate property, the broken-down house, the empty fields stretching in every direction. This is abandonment. This is child endangerment. I left you supplies. Food, diapers, everything you need. It's not abandonment, it's giving us both space to breathe. Space to breathe? Marcus, I have 6-month-old twins and you're leaving me in a house with no electricity or water. The well works. I checked. There's a hand pump. And what do I do when the formula runs out? When the diapers run out? When one of the babies gets sick? Marcus didn't answer. He just turned back to the car. Marcus. Sarah's voice broke. Don't do this. Please. If you need space, fine. Drop us at my sister's and take space. But don't leave us here like this. He paused with his hand on the car door. For a moment, Sarah thought he might change his mind. When Ruth died 5 years ago at age 87, she'd left the property to the county with one stipulation in her will. May this land always provide shelter to those in need. The county had tried to sell it, but the house was too run down and the location too remote. So it sat, abandoned, slowly falling apart. But Ruth Morrison had prayed over this land for decades, had asked God to make it a place of refuge, had believed with her whole heart that this property had a purpose. And now, as Sarah Thompson held her twins in the darkness, terrified and alone, those prayers were about to be answered. Because sometimes miracles don't look like miracles at first. Sometimes they look like old farmhouses with broken windows. Sometimes they look like impossible situations that force us to find strength we didn't know we had. And sometimes they look like a series of coincidences, so perfectly timed that they can only be explained as divine intervention. Sarah didn't know it yet, but she wasn't as alone as she thought. The first miracle was already beginning. I'm sorry, he said, not looking at her. I can't be what you need right now. What they need. They're your children. I know. And that's what makes this so hard. But Sarah, if I stay, I'll break completely. I can feel it. I need to do this or I'll lose my mind. So you're choosing yourself over your own children? I'm choosing survival. For all of us. And with that, Marcus got in the car. Sarah ran toward him, but he'd already started backing up. Marcus! Marcus, please. But he didn't stop. He turned the car around and drove down the long gravel driveway, dust rising in his wake. Sarah stood there, both babies crying in her arms, watching the car disappear. When the sound of the engine finally faded completely, Sarah was left with only the sound of her twins crying and the wind whistling through the broken farmhouse behind her. She turned to look at the structure that was now her only shelter. In the fading light, it looked like something from a horror movie, windows like dead eyes, porch like a gaping mouth. "Okay," Sarah said to her babies, her own voice shaking. "Okay. We're going to be okay. Mommy's going to figure this out." But she had no idea how. Inside the farmhouse was worse than outside. The main room had an old couch covered in dust and mouse droppings. A table with 2 broken chairs. A fireplace filled with debris. The floor was littered with leaves, broken glass, and evidence of animals. Nests in the corners, droppings everywhere. Sarah found the least damaged room, what used to be a bedroom upstairs, and carefully laid down the blanket Marcus had left. She placed both babies on it, changed their diapers with shaking hands, and made bottles with the formula and bottled water Marcus had provided. As she fed Emma and Ethan, Sarah took inventory. What she had. 6 bottles of formula, enough for maybe 3 to 4 days if she stretched it. 2 packs of diapers, maybe 5 days' worth. A dozen bottles of water, some granola bars and crackers, 3 changes of clothes for the babies, 2 changes of clothes for herself, her phone, no signal, battery at 43%, a flashlight, weak batteries, 2 blankets. What she didn't have. Electricity, running water, except the well if it worked. Heat, a way to communicate with anyone, transportation money, any idea where she was. The reality. She was stranded in an abandoned farmhouse in rural Tennessee with 6-month-old twins, enough supplies for maybe a week, and no way to call for help. As night fell, the temperature dropped. October in Tennessee could be cold, especially in an unheated house with broken windows. Sarah bundled the babies together in one blanket and wrapped herself around them, using her body heat to keep them warm. They'd fallen asleep after their bottles, exhausted from crying. But Sarah couldn't sleep. Fear kept her wide awake. What if something, came? This was an isolated property. No neighbors for miles. Who knew what kind of people or animals were out here? What if one of the babies got sick? The cold, the dusty conditions, the stress, any of it could make them ill. And she had no way to get medical help. What if Marcus didn't come back? He'd said a week, maybe 2. But what if he just didn't return? What if he'd driven away and decided his new life started now? Without them. "Please, God," Sarah whispered into the darkness. "Please help us. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to survive this. Please send help." The only answer was the sound of wind through broken windows and mice scurrying in the walls. Sarah held her babies closer and cried silently, so she wouldn't wake them. What Sarah didn't know was that the old farmhouse had a history. It had belonged to the Morrison family, 3 generations of farmers who'd worked this land. The last Morrison, an elderly woman named Ruth, had lived here alone after her husband died. She'd been a devout woman, known throughout the county for her kindness and her faith. Sarah woke with a start as dawn light filtered through the broken windows. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came crashing back. Marcus, the abandonment, the farmhouse. Both babies were still asleep, thank God. They were breathing evenly, warm against her body. Sarah carefully extracted herself and stood, her body aching from sleeping on the hard floor. She needed to assess the situation in daylight. Needed to figure out how to survive. Outside, the property looked different in morning light. The farmhouse sat on about 5 acres, overgrown fields, a collapsed barn, an old chicken coop with no roof. But there was also the well Marcus had mentioned, with a hand pump that looked ancient, an overgrown garden area with some kind of plants still growing, wild apple trees, old and gnarled but with fruit, what looked like a root cellar door on the side of the house. Sarah tried the hand pump. It took several minutes of hard pumping, her arms burning, but finally water gushed out, rusty at first, then clearing. It was cold and tasted metallic, but it was water. "Okay," Sarah said aloud, a habit she'd developed to keep herself calm. "We have water. That's something." She explored the root cellar next. The wooden door was swollen with moisture, but she managed to pry it open. Inside, surprisingly dry, were shelves. Most were empty, but on one shelf she found 3 mason jars of what looked like preserved vegetables, she couldn't tell how old, a box of old candles, matches in a sealed tin, still dry. A kerosene lamp, empty. Sarah grabbed the candles and matches. Those would be essential once her phone's flashlight died. In the overgrown garden, she found what looked like potatoes growing wild, tomatoes gone to seed, and some kind of squash. She had no idea if they were safe to eat, but it was something. The apple trees had small, wormy apples, but some looked edible if she cut away the bad parts. "We're not going to starve," Sarah told herself. At least not immediately. Back inside, the babies were awake and crying. Sarah changed them, only 10 diapers left now from the 2 packs. She'd have to figure out cloth diapers somehow. She made their morning bottles, doing the math. 4 bottles a day, 2 babies, 2 feedings each, 6 bottles of formula left. That was a day and a half of formula remaining. Then what? Sarah had breastfed initially, but her milk had dried up 2 months ago due to stress and poor nutrition. She couldn't just restart that. Fear clawed at her throat. But then Emma smiled, just a random baby smile, probably gas, but it was something. And Sarah made a decision. "We're not giving up," she said to her twins. "Mommy is not giving up. We're going to survive this." The first full day, Sarah worked on making the farmhouse habitable. She used a broom she found, more of a stick with some bristles, to sweep out the least damaged room. She covered the broken window with a garbage bag she'd found, sealed with duct tape from the supplies Marcus left. She gathered wood from the collapsed barn for the fireplace. She pumped water and filled every container she could find. She picked apples and dug up potatoes. It was exhausting work, especially while managing 2 babies. She'd nurse them, put them down, work frantically for 30 minutes, then return to crying babies. Feed them, change them, put them down, work again. By nightfall, she had a relatively clean room, off fire going in the fireplace. It took 6 tries and all her matches before she got it lit. Water stored, some food gathered, both babies fed and changed. She collapsed next to them, utterly exhausted. "Day 1, she whispered. "We made it through day 1. Day 2 was harder. One of the problems with abandoned farmhouses, they're not sealed at all." During the night, Sarah woke to something moving in the room. She turned on her phone's flashlight, battery now at 31%, and saw a possum waddling across the floor. She screamed. The babies screamed. The possum ran. After that, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept the fire burning all night, terrified of what else might come in. By morning, she was running on fumes. And the formula was gone. She'd given the babies their last bottles at sunrise. Now what? Sarah stood at the hand pump, crying as she pumped water. "What do I do? What do I feed them? She'd read somewhere that babies could drink diluted milk. But she had no milk. No refrigeration. No store within walking distance. She didn't even know how far the nearest town was. God, please, Sarah prayed aloud, tears streaming. Please show me what to do. Please don't let my babies starve because their father abandoned them. Please. And then the first miracle happened. Sarah heard an engine. At first, she thought she was hallucinating from exhaustion. But no, there was definitely a vehicle coming up the driveway. Her heart leaped. Marcus. He'd come back. She ran to the front, both babies in her arms. But it wasn't Marcus's car. It was an old pickup truck. Sarah's joy turned to fear. Who was this? Would they help? Or was she about to face a different kind of danger? The truck stopped. An elderly man, had to be in his 70s, got out, moving stiffly. He was dressed in overalls and a flannel shirt, a kind face weathered by sun and time. "Ma'am," he called out, staying by his truck. "You okay?" Sarah didn't know whether to run or approach. She settled for staying on the porch, ready to bolt inside if needed. We're okay, she said, though it was obviously a lie. The old man looked at her, at the abandoned farmhouse, at the babies in her arms, at Sarah's obvious distress, and his face filled with concern. "I'm Earl Jenkins. I own the property next door, about 3 miles that way." He pointed east. "Saw smoke from your chimney yesterday. This house has been empty for 5 years. Figured I should check." "We're just staying here temporarily," Sarah said. Earl looked at her for a long moment. Then, very gently, "Ma'am, nobody temporarily stays in an abandoned farmhouse with twin babies. What's really going on?" And something about his kind eyes, his grandfatherly demeanor, broke Sarah's resolve. She started crying. "My husband left us here 3 days ago. Said he needed space to figure things out. He left some supplies but they're running out and I don't have formula left and I don't know what to do and—" "Whoa, whoa," Earl said, approaching slowly with his hands visible, like calming a frightened animal. "It's okay. You're okay. Let's figure this out." "I don't even know where we are," Sarah sobbed. "You're about 15 miles outside of Crossville, Tennessee. Middle of nowhere, basically." Earl looked at the farmhouse. This was Ruth Morrison's place. Good woman. She'd be happy to know it's sheltering someone who needs it. "I need formula. For the babies. I don't have money but I can work it off, I can." "Stop," Earl said firmly but kindly. "My wife Margaret and I have 6 grandchildren. We have everything. Formula, diapers, clothes, whatever you need. Let me go home, load up supplies, and bring them back. Should take me an hour." "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering. Besides, Margaret would skin me alive if I came home and told her about babies in need and didn't help." He started back to his truck. "You stay put. Keep that fire going. I'll be back within 2 hours with enough supplies to last you a week. After that, we'll figure out next steps." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Why would you help strangers?" Earl paused at his truck door. "Because Ruth Morrison prayed for decades that this land would shelter folks in need. Looks like her prayers are being answered. I'll be back soon." True to his word, Earl returned 90 minutes later. His truck bed was loaded with cases of formula, boxes of diapers, baby clothes, food, bread, peanut butter, canned goods, fruit, blankets, a space heater. He'd bring a generator next trip, he said. Cleaning supplies, first aid kit, and a casserole his wife had sent, still warm. Margaret's coming tomorrow, Earl said as he helped unload. She'll want to meet the babies and make sure you have everything you need. Sarah was crying again, but this time from relief and gratitude. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me by taking care of those babies and yourself. Now, you got questions about working that stove or anything? They spent the next hour with Earl teaching Sarah the basics. How to safely use the fireplace, where to find more firewood, how to winterize the broken windows better, which wild plants in the garden were edible. Before he left, Earl said, I'm going to come by tomorrow with my toolbox. Fix that window properly. Patch that roof. Make this place actually livable. That okay with you? More than okay. And Sarah. Earl looked at her seriously. Your husband. You know he committed a crime, right? Abandonment. Endangerment. You could call the police. I know. But he said he'd come back. I need to give him a chance to make this right. Earl didn't look convinced, but he nodded. Your choice. But if he doesn't come back in a week, we're calling the police and getting you proper help. Deal. Deal. That night, with her babies fed, warm, and sleeping peacefully, Sarah sat by the fire and cried. But they weren't tears of despair anymore. They were tears of gratitude. She'd been abandoned. Left to die, essentially. But instead of dying, she'd found help. Found kindness. Found hope. Thank you, Ruth Morrison, Sarah whispered to the ghost of the woman who'd prayed over this land. Thank you for your prayers. They're working. And outside, in the fields that Ruth Morrison had loved, a soft wind blew, almost like an answer. The miracle had begun. But it was far from over. Margaret Jenkins arrived the next morning in a flurry of energy and grandmotherly authority. She was a round woman in her late 60s with silver hair, a warm smile, and a kind of take-charge personality that made you feel instantly cared for. Let me see those babies, she announced, bustling into the farmhouse with bags of supplies. Sarah, who'd barely slept despite having formula and diapers now, handed over Emma first. Margaret cooed and rocked her expertly. Oh, what a sweet girl. And this must be Ethan. Twins. Double blessing, double work. Margaret looked at Sarah with shrewd, kind eyes. And you look exhausted, honey. When's the last time you had a proper meal and a full night's sleep? I don't remember. Thought so. Okay, here's what's happening. I'm watching these babies. You're going to eat this breakfast I brought. She pulled out a Tupperware container. And then you're going to sleep for 4 hours. Non-negotiable. I can't just. You can and you will. You can't take care of babies if you collapse from exhaustion. I raised 4 kids and helped raise 6 grandchildren. I know what I'm doing. Now eat and sleep. Go. Sarah woke 4 hours later to the sound of laughter and hammering. She went downstairs to find Margaret feeding both babies at once, a skill Sarah hadn't mastered yet, while through the window she could see Earl and another man working on the roof. There she is, Margaret said. Feel better? Yes. Much better. Thank you. Good. Because we have plans for this place. Earl and I talked last night. If you're going to stay here, Even temporarily, you need it to be safe and livable. So we called in some favors. Favors. As if on cue, 2 more trucks pulled up. Out came more people, a younger couple, an older woman, a teenage boy. Margaret introduced them. This is Pastor David and his wife Linda from Crossville Community Church. This is Nancy, she runs the food bank. And that's her grandson Tyler. Pastor David, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a ready smile, extended his hand. We heard about your situation. Wanted to help if we could. I don't understand, Sarah said, overwhelmed. Why are all of you here? Because that's what we do, Linda said simply. Earl told us about you and the babies, and word spread. When someone in our community needs help, we show up. But I'm not in your community. I'm nobody. Nancy, a sturdy woman with gray hair pulled back in a bun, laughed. Honey, the minute you set foot in this county, you became part of our community. Now, I brought food from the food bank, enough to last you 2 weeks. And I'll keep bringing more, until you don't need it anymore. Sarah felt tears threatening again. I don't know how to repay. Don't repay, Pastor David said gently. Pay forward. Someday, when you're on your feet again, you'll help someone else who needs it. That's how it works. Over the next week, the transformation of the farmhouse was stunning. Earl and a crew of volunteers fixed the roof, completely patched and weatherproofed, all the windows, replaced with donated materials, the porch, reinforced and made safe, the fireplace, cleaned and made efficient, the hand pump, serviced so it worked smoothly. They also brought a generator for electricity, a space heater for warmth, a hot plate for cooking, more furniture, donated by church members, a crib, actually 2 cribs that converted to toddler beds later, clothes, toys, blankets, everything babies needed. Pastor Linda organized a schedule where church members would visit daily, bringing food, helping with babies, teaching Sarah skills she needed, cooking on a hot plate, preserving food, basic repairs. Nancy from the food bank set up regular deliveries. Margaret came almost every day, teaching Sarah everything from making cloth diapers, for backup, to establishing sleep schedules for twins. You're building a village, Margaret told her one afternoon while they folded baby clothes together. Every mama needs a village. Most don't have one anymore. But out here, we still believe in taking care of each other. Sarah was amazed by how much she was learning. Skills she'd never needed before. How to can vegetables from the garden, how to make bread from scratch, how to heat water efficiently for washing, how to entertain babies with minimal toys, how to preserve apples for winter, how to stay warm with minimal electricity. But more than skills, she was learning about herself. She was stronger than she'd thought. Braver. More capable. I never did anything before, Sarah told Margaret one day. I grew up in the suburbs. Went to college. Got a desk job. Married Marcus. Everything was easy and comfortable. I had no idea I could do any of this. That's because you never had to, Margaret said wisely. But strength isn't about not being afraid or struggling. It's about doing what needs to be done anyway. And honey, you're one of the strongest women I've met. But Marcus hadn't come back. It had been 2 weeks now. No call, no text, no sign of him. Earl had fixed that problem too. He'd brought Sarah an old cell phone with a prepaid plan and showed her where on the property she could get signal, on top of a small hill about a quarter-mile away. Sarah tried calling Marcus. Straight to voicemail. She tried texting. No response. She called his parents. They hadn't heard from him either. "If you find him, tell him we're ashamed of what he did," Marcus's father had said coldly. She even tried calling the auto plant where he'd worked. No one had seen him. Marcus had vanished. "Honey, I think you need to face facts," Earl said gently one evening. "He's not coming back. At least not soon. You need to make plans beyond waiting for him." "But what if he does come back? What if he's just working through things?" "Then he can work through things while providing for his family. That's what men do." "But Sarah, you can't put your life on hold waiting for someone who abandoned you." Pastor David came by that week to talk. "Sarah, I want to discuss your options. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need. The county has agreed to let you live here rent-free for now. But eventually, you'll need income. A plan." "I know. I don't know what I'm qualified for. I was doing data entry before the babies came. That's it. What do you want to do?" Sarah looked around at the farmhouse, at the vegetable garden she'd been tending, at the root cellar she'd organized, at the chickens Earl had brought her, 4 hens for fresh eggs. "I don't know," she said slowly. "But I know I'm happy here. Happier than I was in our apartment in the city. I like growing food, taking care of things, building something." Pastor David smiled. "Then maybe that's your answer. This land, all 5 acres, could be productive. Ruth Morrison ran a small farm here. Sold vegetables and eggs at the farmer's market. You could do the same." "I don't know anything about farming." "You didn't know anything about surviving in an abandoned farmhouse either. But you learned. And Earl and Margaret would help you learn farming." Sarah felt something stir in her chest. Not quite hope, but possibility. Could I really do that? Support myself and the twins by farming? Not immediately. It would take time to build up. But in the meantime, the church has a discretionary fund to help families in crisis. We could provide some financial support while you get established. And the county might have programs for single mothers starting small businesses. "Single mother," Sarah repeated. The reality was settling in. "I guess that's what I am now. Only if Marcus doesn't come back. And honestly, Sarah, do you even want him back? After what he did?" Sarah looked at her twins. Emma and Ethan were on a blanket on the floor, playing with rattles that Margaret had brought. They were healthy now, thriving even, happy despite everything. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "Part of me is still angry. But part of me thinks about the man I married. The man who used to be kind and funny and loving. That man wouldn't do this. Something broke in him." "Trauma breaks people different ways," Pastor David said. "Some break toward strength. Some break toward weakness. You broke toward strength, Sarah. You fought for your babies. Marcus broke toward weakness. He ran. Can broken people be fixed? Sometimes. With help, with faith, with effort. But they have to want to be fixed. And they have to do the work." That night, Sarah sat on the porch, now safe and sturdy thanks to Earl, and looked at the stars. She thought about Marcus. About the life they'd had. About the life they'd lost. But mostly, she thought about the life she was building here. In this old farmhouse. With her twins. With the help of strangers who'd become family. "I don't need you to come back," Sarah whispered to the night, to Marcus wherever he was. I want you to come back and be the father our children deserve. But I don't need you. Because I can do this. I am doing this. And for the first time since Marcus had driven away, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. The miracle wasn't just about surviving. It was about discovering she could thrive. 3 months had passed since Marcus had abandoned them. It was now January, and the Tennessee winter had settled in hard. But inside the farmhouse, it was warm. Earl had helped Sarah install a proper wood stove, far more efficient than the fireplace. The windows were all sealed. The roof didn't leak. The generator provided electricity for essentials. And Sarah had transformed the property. With Earl's guidance and backbreaking work, she had expanded the vegetable garden and prepared it for spring planting, fixed the chicken coop, and now had 8 hens providing eggs, learned to preserve food. The root cellar was stocked with canned goods, established a routine with the twins, started planning for a small farm business. Emma and Ethan, now 9 months old, were thriving. They were hitting milestones, laughing, starting to crawl. They knew Margaret as Gran-Gran and Earl as Gramps. They smiled when Pastor David visited. They were surrounded by love. Sarah herself had changed too. Her hands were calloused from work. Her body was stronger. Her mind was clearer. She'd stopped waiting for Marcus and started building a future. You look different, Margaret said one afternoon as they worked on sewing baby clothes. Stronger. I feel different, Sarah admitted. I never knew I could be this person. Strong. Independent. Capable. You always were, Margaret said. You just didn't know it because you never had to be. And then Marcus came back. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Sarah was outside chopping wood, another skill she'd learned, when she heard a car on the driveway. She looked up and her heart stopped. Marcus's car. The same car he'd driven away in. He got out slowly, looking uncertain. He'd lost weight. He looked older, more worn. Sarah, he said, stopping several feet away. She stood there, axe in hand, waiting. I came back. I can see that. Can we talk? Sarah looked at the farmhouse, at the home she'd built, the life she'd created. Then back at the man who'd abandoned her. Talk. They sat on the porch. Sarah didn't invite him inside. I'm sorry, Marcus started. God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. What I did was unforgivable. I know that. Yes, it was. I was having a breakdown. I see that now. The pressure, the responsibility, the fear, it all crushed me and I broke. I ran because I didn't know what else to do. Where did you go? My buddy Jake's place in Memphis. Crashed on his couch. Tried to find work. Couldn't focus. Couldn't sleep. All I could think about was you and the babies and what I'd done. Sarah said nothing. I started seeing a therapist. Jake made me. She diagnosed me with severe anxiety and depression. I'm on medication now. In treatment. I'm trying to fix what's broken in me. Good for you. Sarah, I want to come back. I want to be a husband again. A father. I know I have to earn that, but... No. Marcus stopped. What? No. You can't come back. But I'm getting help. I'm trying to. Marcus, you don't get it. Sarah's voice was calm but firm. You didn't just leave me. You left us, me and 2 6-month-old babies, in an abandoned house with no electricity, barely any supplies, no way to call for help. You sentenced us to probable death. I didn't think. Exactly. You didn't think. You thought only about yourself. And in the 3 months since, you haven't called, haven't texted, haven't sent money. Nothing. I didn't have money to send. I was barely surviving. And you think we were thriving? Sarah's calm cracked. You think I had it easy? Marcus, I had to learn how to pump water from a well. How to make fires to keep our babies from freezing. How to survive in a house falling apart around us. And I did it. I survived it. Without you. Marcus looked at the property, really looked at it for the first time. The repaired house. The chicken coop. The garden beds prepared for spring. The wood neatly stacked. You did all this. I had help. From people I'd never met. Strangers who showed me more kindness in 1 day than you showed me in 3 months. I'm proud of you. I really am. But Sarah, I'm their father. I have rights. Rights. Sarah stood up, anger finally breaking through. You want to talk about rights? You abandoned us. That's a felony, Marcus. Criminal abandonment. Child endangerment. The police could still arrest you. Marcus went pale. You called the police? No. But I could have. I should have. Everyone told me to. But I wanted to give you a chance to come back on your own. To make it right. I'm trying to make it right now. 3 months too late. They sat in tense silence. Finally, Marcus said, Can I at least see them? The twins. Sarah wanted to say no. But they were his children. Legally, biologically, he had a claim. 5 minutes. That's it. She led him inside. Emma and Ethan were in their shared crib, one of 2 Earl had built, just waking from their nap. When they saw Marcus, they didn't smile. Didn't reach for him. They looked at him like he was a stranger. Because he was. Emma, Ethan, Marcus said, his voice breaking. It's Daddy. I missed you so much. But when he reached for them, Emma started crying. Then Ethan. They didn't know him. Marcus's face crumbled. They don't remember me. What did you expect? Sarah said, picking up both babies to comfort them. You left when they were 6 months old. They don't have object permanence yet. You're gone for 3 months? You're gone forever in their world. I can rebuild that connection. I can. No. Sarah's voice was final. You can't live here. You can't be part of this. Not now. Maybe not ever. Sarah, please. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah said, her voice steady. You're going to leave. You're going to continue your therapy. You're going to get a job. And you're going to start sending child support. The court will determine how much. If you do all that, consistently, for at least 6 months, we can talk about supervised visitation. But that's it. But I'm their father. Then act like it. Fathers provide. Fathers protect. Fathers don't abandon their children in condemned houses. Marcus was crying now. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I love them. I love you. Love isn't a feeling, Marcus. It's a choice. It's action. You chose to leave. I choose to protect my children from someone who could make that choice." Before Marcus left, Sarah made him sign a paper she'd had Pastor David help her draft, essentially admitting to the abandonment and agreeing to pay child support. It wasn't legally binding yet, but it was a start. "If you violate this, I go to the police," Sarah told him. "If you don't send support, I go to the police. If you show up here uninvited, I go to the police. Do you understand?" "Yes." "And Marcus? Get help. Real help. Because the man I married wouldn't have done this. Find that man again. Or become someone better. Do it for yourself, not for us. But do it." Marcus nodded, unable to speak. As he drove away, again, Sarah felt something she didn't expect. Relief. Not because he was gone, but because she'd stood her ground. She'd protected her children. She'd chosen herself and them over the fantasy of fixing a broken marriage. That night, Earl and Margaret came by. "We saw Marcus's car," Earl said. "He came back. And left again," Sarah confirmed. "For good this time, probably." "How do you feel?" Margaret asked. "Strong," Sarah said, surprising herself. "I feel strong. For the first time in my life, I made a hard choice and stood by it. I didn't let guilt or fear or obligation make me do something I knew was wrong." "That's growth," Margaret said proudly. "I couldn't have done any of this without you both. Without everyone who helped." Earl shook his head. "You could have. You're stronger than you think. We just helped you see it." Spring came to the farmhouse. Sarah planted her garden, rows of tomatoes, beans, squash, lettuce, peppers. Earl helped her plant fruit trees that would produce in a few years. The chickens were laying consistently. Sarah was selling eggs at the farmer's market every Saturday, bringing in small but steady income. She'd filed for divorce and legal custody. Marcus had sent 2 child support payments so far, inconsistent but something. The twins were walking now, exploring the property with endless curiosity. They called Margaret Gran and Earl Gramps, clearly now. They were happy, healthy, loved. And Sarah had discovered something unexpected. She was good at this. Not just surviving but thriving. The farm was productive. The community loved her. She'd found purpose. "You thinking about making this permanent?" Earl asked one day as they worked on expanding the chicken coop. "Maybe," Sarah admitted. "I love it here. I love this life. It's hard work, but it's good work. Ruth Morrison would be proud. This land is serving its purpose, sheltering someone who needed it, helping them build something beautiful." Sarah looked at the farmhouse, no longer abandoned, no longer broken, but a real home, and smiled. "I never thought being abandoned would turn into the best thing that ever happened to me. But here we are." The miracle wasn't just survival. It was transformation. It was discovering that sometimes the worst betrayal leads to the greatest blessing. And sometimes, abandoned houses become homes. And abandoned people become heroes of their own stories. The old Morrison farmhouse barely resembled the crumbling structure where Marcus had left Sarah and the twins. The exterior had been completely restored. Fresh paint, barn red with white trim, new roof, repaired porch with a swing that Margaret had insisted on. The yard was no longer overgrown but maintained, with flower beds that Sarah had planted along the walkway. Behind the house, the farm was thriving. A productive vegetable garden, Sarah now sold produce at the farmer's market. 12 chickens producing eggs daily. A small greenhouse Earl had helped build for winter, growing berry bushes, starting to establish young fruit trees that would produce in a few years. A roadside stand Sarah had set up for direct sales. But the biggest change was inside. The farmhouse was now a warm, cozy home. Donated furniture had been supplemented with pieces Sarah refinished herself. The twins' room, freshly painted yellow, was filled with toys and books from church donations. The kitchen had a functional stove, propane, since they still didn't have grid electricity, and counters lined with canned goods. Sarah had preserved herself. It was a home. A real home. Emma and Ethan were 15 months old now, toddling, talking in small words, full of personality. They knew nothing of those first terrifying days in the abandoned farmhouse. Their earliest memories would be of warmth, love, community, and the farm. Gramps. Ethan squealed when Earl's truck pulled up one Saturday morning. Gran. Emma echoed as Margaret got out. The elderly couple had become their true grandparents in every way that mattered. Earl taught them about animals and plants. Margaret taught them songs and baked cookies with them. "We brought the materials for the barn," Earl announced. "Figure if you're going to be a real farmer, you need a real barn." "Earl, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm volunteering. Besides, I'm retired and bored. Building gives me purpose." Over the past year, Earl and Margaret had become like parents to Sarah. They'd taught her everything: farming, parenting, life skills she'd never learned in her suburban upbringing. "You saved my life," Sarah had told them once. "No, honey," Margaret had responded. "We just helped you save yourself." The legal situation had resolved itself, though not easily. Marcus sent child support, irregularly at first, then more consistently after the court order came through. He was living in Memphis, working as a warehouse manager, still in therapy. He'd asked for visitation rights. Sarah, with Pastor David's counsel and a lawyer provided pro bono by a church member, had agreed to supervised visits, 2 hours every other week at a neutral location with a supervisor present. The visits were awkward. The twins didn't really know Marcus. They were polite but distant, treating him like a friendly stranger rather than their father. "They'll warm up eventually," the supervisor told Marcus after one particularly difficult visit where both twins cried and asked for "Mama." But Marcus was realizing something painful. He'd lost more than 3 months when he abandoned them. He'd lost their childhood, their trust, their love. "I can't undo what I did," Marcus told Sarah during one of their brief exchanges at visitation handoff. "I know that. But I'm trying to be better. For them. For me." "That's all you can do," Sarah said, not unkindly but not warmly either. "Keep trying." The divorce had been finalized. Sarah had full custody. Marcus had visitation rights he was slowly earning. And Sarah had moved on. The community had embraced Sarah and the twins completely. She'd become a regular at Crossville Community Church. Every Sunday, she'd bring the twins. They loved the nursery and the attention from the elderly church members who doted on them. She'd joined the local farmers cooperative, learning from experienced farmers and sharing resources. She'd even started teaching a class at the community center, urban to rural, transitioning to farm life, helping other people who wanted to leave city life and try homesteading. "You're quite the success story," Pastor David told her after service one Sunday. Woman abandoned in an old farmhouse, now thriving farmer and community educator. "It's remarkable. It's a miracle," Sarah corrected. I couldn't have done any of this alone. But you did do it. With help, yes. But you did the work. You made the choices. You fought for your children and yourself. That's not luck, Sarah. That's strength. The story of the Morrison farmhouse spread beyond the local community. A reporter from Nashville had heard about it and written an article, "Abandoned Mother Turns Condemned Farmhouse into Thriving Farm." The story went regional, then national. News outlets picked it up. Sarah started getting interview requests. At first, she declined. But Pastor David convinced her, "Your story could help other women in crisis. Show them that they can survive. That they're stronger than they think." So Sarah agreed to one interview with a major morning show. The segment aired on a Tuesday morning. Sarah, sitting on her porch with the farmhouse behind her and the twins playing nearby, told her story. The abandonment. The terror. The fight to survive. The community that saved her. The life she'd built. What would you say to other women facing impossible situations? The interviewer asked. Sarah thought carefully. I'd say, you're stronger than you know. You have capabilities you haven't discovered yet because you haven't needed them. And when you do need them, they'll be there. Also, ask for help. Accept help. Build community. No one survives alone. And what about your ex-husband? Do you forgive him? Sarah paused. I'm working on it. Forgiveness is a process, not an event. What he did was unforgivable in many ways. But holding on to anger only hurts me. So I'm choosing to let it go, slowly. Not for him, for me. And for my children, so they don't grow up watching their mother be consumed by bitterness. What's next for you? Sarah smiled. We're expanding the farm. Adding goats this spring. Maybe starting a small farm school to teach others these skills. Building a life. A good life. Right here on this land that Ruth Morrison prayed over decades ago. The interview response was overwhelming. Sarah received hundreds of messages, from women who'd been abandoned, from single mothers struggling, from people inspired by her story. One message came from an unexpected source. Dear Sarah, my name is Jennifer Morrison Clark. Ruth Morrison was my grandmother. I saw your interview. I can't tell you how much it means to know that Grandma's prayers were answered. She always said that land had a purpose. That it would shelter people who needed it. And it did. It sheltered you. Thank you for honoring her memory by thriving there. If you ever need anything, please reach out. Grandma would be so proud. Jennifer. Sarah replied, and Jennifer visited the following month. She brought old photos of Ruth Morrison, stories of the woman who'd prayed over this land, and her grandmother's personal journals. In one entry from 30 years earlier, Ruth had written, I prayed again today for this land. Asked the Lord to make it a refuge. A place where broken people could heal. Where desperate people could find hope. Where families could rebuild. I don't know if I'll live to see it, but I believe God hears these prayers. Someday, this land will serve its purpose. Sarah cried reading it. She prayed for me. 30 years before I was even here, she prayed for me. She prayed for whoever needed it, Jennifer said. You just happened to be the one who came. But yes, her prayers covered you. 2 years after the abandonment, the Morrison farmhouse was now officially Hope Farm. Sarah had registered it as a small business and non-profit hybrid. The farm produced income through vegetable and egg sales, a CSA, community-supported agriculture program with 20-member families, farm tours and educational workshops, a small farm stay program. The renovated barn had 2 guest rooms for people wanting to experience farm life. But the non-profit side was what Sarah was most proud of: Hope Farm Emergency Housing. With help from grants, church donations, and community support, Sarah had built 2 small cottages on the property. Simple but comfortable structures with kitchenettes, bathrooms, and sleeping space. These cottages housed families in crisis temporarily: women fleeing domestic violence, families facing homelessness, people needing a place to land while rebuilding their lives. "You give them what you were given," Pastor David said at the ribbon cutting for the first cottage. "Hope, shelter, community, a chance to start over." Sarah nodded, looking at the growing farm, the renovated house, the new cottages. Ruth Morrison prayed for this land to be a refuge. Now it is. For me, and for others. Emma and Ethan were 2.5 now, full of energy, questions, and love. They helped Sarah collect eggs, gentle with the chickens, picked vegetables, and played in the dirt. They saw Marcus once a month now for unsupervised visits. The relationship was better. He'd been consistent with support and therapy, and the twins were warming to him. "They'll never see me as their real dad," Marcus had said sadly during one handoff. "You are their real dad biologically," Sarah replied. "But Earl is their gramps who teaches them about chickens. Pastor David is their Pastor Dave, who plays guitar with them. Your dad Marcus who visits sometimes. That's the relationship you built when you left. It's up to you what relationship you build going forward." It wasn't cruel, just honest. And Marcus, to his credit, was trying. He'd stayed sober, kept his job, maintained therapy. He'd even started volunteering at a shelter for homeless families. "Your story inspired me," he'd told Sarah. "How you turned abandonment into purpose. I want to do that too. Not to fix what I broke with you, that's probably not fixable. But to fix what's broken in me and help others." Sarah respected that. Respected the work he was doing. But they'd never be together again. That door had closed. One evening, Sarah sat on her porch swing with Earl and Margaret, watching the twins play in the yard as the sun set. "You ever think about dating again?" Margaret asked. "You're young, Sarah. You deserve companionship." "Maybe someday," Sarah said. "But right now, I'm happy. I have my kids, my farm, my community. I have purpose and peace. That's enough." "That's more than enough," Earl said. "That's everything." Sarah rocked on the swing, listening to her children's laughter, smelling the earth and growing things, feeling the peace that had replaced the terror of that first night in the abandoned farmhouse. "Thank you," she said to Earl and Margaret, "for saving us, for believing in us, for teaching me I could do this." "Thank you for letting us," Margaret replied, "for letting us be grandparents again, for giving purpose to old folks who needed it." Earl added, "And thank Ruth Morrison. She prayed this land into purpose long before any of us got here." That night, after the twins were asleep, Sarah walked the property in the moonlight, something she did sometimes when she needed to think or pray. She walked past the garden she'd planted, the chicken coop she maintained, the cottages that now housed 2 families rebuilding their lives, the barn Earl was helping her construct. She stopped at a small marker she'd placed at the edge of the property, a simple stone with an inscription. Ruth Morrison, 1928 to 2018. She prayed that this land would shelter those in need. Her prayers were answered. Thank you. Thank you, Ruth, Sarah whispered. You prayed for me before I existed. You prepared this place for the worst day of my life. Your faith created my miracle. The wind rustled through the trees, almost like an answer. Sarah walked back to the farmhouse, no longer abandoned, no longer broken, but glowing with warm light from within. Her home, her farm, her miracle. She paused at the door and looked back at the land. I was abandoned here, she said aloud, and it became the best thing that ever happened to me. Because sometimes God uses the worst betrayals to create the greatest blessings. Sometimes abandoned places become homes. And sometimes abandoned people become exactly who they were meant to be. She went inside, locked the door, and climbed the stairs to check on her sleeping twins one more time. Emma and Ethan slept peacefully, safe, warm, loved. They would grow up on this farm. They would learn about hard work, about community, about resilience. They would know that their mother had been abandoned here, and had built something beautiful from that abandonment. They would learn that miracles aren't always dramatic moments. Sometimes miracles are old farmhouses that become homes. Sometimes miracles are strangers who become family. Sometimes miracles are discovering you're strong enough to survive what should have destroyed you. And sometimes, miracles are simply waking up each day and choosing to build something good from something broken. That was the miracle of Hope Farm. And it was just beginning.